Good evening, everybody. Welcome to today's class. Salesforce platform development. Today's day 10. And yesterday we started talking about triggers, right? Started talking about triggers and what they are, what it entails, how to use them, what they are used for, right? Triggers are operations that there are operations that happen automatically when any kind of database manipulation is done, right? Database manipulation in the sense that you created an account, you created something, you updated something, or you deleted something, or you undelete something, right? If you delete, you can undelete. That's last week class. There is delete, there's undelete. So all those operations you can perform directly in the DB. There is every tendency for them to, it is possible for you to create trigger for them so that when those manipulation happens, you might want to do something in relation with respect to what happened in your DB, right? Now, we looked into the types of trigger. We have the before trigger and the after trigger, and we looked at trigger context in the sense that what are the actions and properties you have access to in a trigger, right? What are the actions and properties you can access to you can work with in a trigger? How to get your data. We're talking about creating something in the database, or updating something or deleting something. That data, you might want to do something with it, right? So how do you access the data we talked about yesterday? You use trigger context. Trigger the new, trigger the old, trigger the new map, trigger the old map, right? And we looked into one particular context, which is the operation type. The operation type is going to give you these values. Now, we looked into the syntax for writing a trigger, your trigger keyword, your trigger name, what your trigger is listening on, the S object is listening on. This could be a standard object or a custom object. Just make sure you're using the API name. So then what action you are listening for? Are you listening for insert or are you listening for update? You can have as many as possible. I also talked about, clear this, but yesterday's class, the types of events you have. Some events are not possible. There's nothing like before delete, right? We said we have, from yesterday's class, we have bunch of events. We have before insert, after insert, before update, after update. We have before delete, after delete. Then we have after on delete, but there's no before on delete because there is nothing. The on delete is when you click on it that it actually happens. And you get data for some, like before insert, you don't get any data. We talked about those yesterday because you don't get old data. You don't have access to trigger.old is going to give you null. It's going to be null if you are doing this on before insert. We talked about some of the way it works, some of the things you get, some of the things you don't get. We talked about all those things yesterday. So today we'll continue, right? Yesterday we had some use cases. We talked about adding the website field to an account object that is created. So if you create an account from anywhere and there's no website field, we're going to automatically add black for the CA. But there is a website field. Because of this, if a website goes null, then we'll just use what you put. But if you don't put anything, then it falls back to this. We also had another use case, which is, okay, when we create an account, right? We also want a related contact to be created immediately for that account. So then we did this, right? And while we're doing this, we looked into some some of the things you should do, like the things you should do and things you shouldn't do when you're dealing with data, right? So if you're dealing with data, how do you, like, you're dealing with bulk data, some of the things you are not supposed to do, right? And things you can, best practices. So we talked about having DMLs and queries inside a for loop. That is not good. We saw examples of those yesterday. So you make sure any code you are writing, whether a class, a trigger, a test, you don't have any database, anything that is going to the database, don't have it in a loop. Anything that either you are collecting something from database or you are putting something in a database, make sure it's not in a loop. Take it outside. One other, some other things we talked about yesterday, we did this before update, where we were trying to do some, we were trying to get accounts that does not have, like, the account you are putting. We want to check, okay, this account you are updating, if it doesn't have a contact, then we'll give it a contact. If it has a contact, then it's fine, right? We looked into some ways we could play around data. Now, like I said yesterday, the things I did there are multiple ways you could go about this. There are multiple ways you could go about this query. It actually just put trigger.new here instead of all these manipulation we were doing earlier. If you put trigger.new here, it's still going to give you, this is still going to run fine, because trigger.new is a list. And if you do this where account ID equals trigger.new, it's just going to go inside this trigger.new and collect and use the ID of each of the stuff in this list. So this is the same thing as getting the, so if this is actually 3 lines that will just, this is 3 line now with the account IDs, that are all account IDs, right? For us to get we had to go through some route and get some things out and stuff like that. 4 lines, this is it. I was just trying to show you how to play around with data yesterday, but you could have easily just said trigger.new is still going to work fine. It's the same thing as, so we can actually take all these off and this is still fine. Even though this is not a list of IDs, a list of accounts, but they've written the query in such a way that if you put this, it's just going to pick the ID from each of those accounts and use it for your query. So there are many ways you could go about it. Anything you think of, implement it, then you can start improving it as you move along. So now, today we want to look into cleaning up this thing. Your trigger shouldn't look like this. Trigger is trigger is not really an action. Your class is an action. That was last week class. Was it last week? Yeah, last week class. Class is where you should do stuffs. Don't do things inside trigger, right? Because the problem is all this code I've written inside this trigger, they are not reusable. This is the only file I can use them. I can't use them anywhere. I can't invoke it. I can't do anything because it's a trigger. It will be invoked automatically. So let's say sometimes in the future, I want to do this kind of stuff. Probably I want to call this thing from an anonymous Apex to even see if I will get the correct result. I can't do this. So instead of limiting all these fine thing that I've written, just limiting it to this file, I could put it in a class, then invoke the class from the trigger. So when the trigger runs, the trigger goes and invoke the class, and I have the class for use for any other thing. So I could go to my Black Force contact controller now, create a method here, right? I could just create a static method. We did this. I told you about classes that I used last week. So create a method, public method. What are we trying to do here? Contact for, let's say static. For now, let's do void. Contact for count, right? And we can now say, okay, what do we need? What do we actually need? We need trigger.new to come in. So I think that's the only thing we needed, right? So we could just say list of accounts, right? The only thing we know that trigger.new is the only trigger context we are using here is trigger.new, right? That's it. That's the only thing we are using. Trigger.new. So, and we know that trigger.new is list of what we are dealing with. In our own case, it will be list of accounts. So I will just say list of account, right? And give it something, ACCS, right? Then I can just copy my code from here. Just copy everything, right? Yeah, let's copy everything. Right, then put it here. Put it here. Then I can change this trigger.new to account. It's the same thing because what I will be passing into this method is going to be trigger.new. So let me just call the method from the trigger. Then call the dot. What's the method name? The method name is contact for account. Then trigger.new. Depending on what in your own case, it might be trigger.new map. In your own case, you might be using multiple things. Maybe at some places, at some point here, I'm also using trigger.old for something. I can also bring in trigger.old, but I don't think I'm using trigger.old. So if I'm using trigger.old, I can now say, okay, another list of accounts. List of accounts. Account, then just give it a name, old data. Then you can now use that old data. Then in your trigger, you now have trigger.old. But in our own case, it's just trigger.new we are using, so we won't need this. Just trigger.new. Then here, it will be just the trigger.new, which is in our own case, is just ACCS, right? So I can now go ahead and change all this trigger.new to ACCS. trigger the new to ACCS, and that should be fine. Let's see if this will work, right? Yeah, so that was saved. Okay, so instead of us having that big long code about 10, 20 lines inside your trigger, here, let's say I have about 5 different events here, and I have them one by one, and I have each one of them having long lines of code like that I can't even reuse. Imagine spending 2 days on one block of code and you can't reuse it. By tomorrow, you want to do that same thing, you still have to go and write it again. No. Copy it into a class, put it in a class, put your code in a class, then I can reuse it. I could invoke it from the trigger, or I could even invoke it from an anonymous window, right? So it's not just tied to my trigger again. It's not a free floating class. You get, it's not a method I can use for anything. But what we wrote yesterday, you can't use it for anything. It will only run when account is updated. So that's the difference between having your code in a trigger and having it in a method and just call the method. Then, as long as you know the data you will be using, I know I'll be using new data. In my own case, what I had here before was trigger.new, right? So I just bring in all those things I'm collecting from trigger. If I know everything I'm using from trigger here, every time I'm using from trigger, I'll just add them one by one to this place. So if I'm using trigger.old, I will also say trigger.old. If I'm using trigger.old map, I will say trigger.old map. Then I can go to my method and add them one by one. This is the new, let's say, new data, because that's the first thing, right? Trigger.new, great. So the second one, list of account. That one is trigger.old, so that's old data. Old data. The other one is trigger.old map. I know this is a map of ID account. So all I need to do is map of ID account. Then what do we call it? Account IDs. Something like that, exactly. Anything you feel like calling it. But I'm not using all these things. The only thing I'm using is the new data. So there is no need bringing things you won't be using. So take it off. Take it off. I'm just trying to let you know you can add, like, a very good thing is write your class, right? Write your class normally. Forget about the fact that you are doing trigger. Write your class normally. Then your required data in the class. In our class, we know let's say I've written this class last week, right? I know that my class, the requirement is, let's go over the requirement again. The requirement is, Tony, wants that anytime an account is created, the contact should also be created. Now, the first thing that comes to your head is trigger, right? But instead of going through the trigger route first, you can do it. Everything is fine as long as you know what you're doing. You could come and say, okay, write your class. You are going to get a list of accounts. That is what they are supplying. They want when they update accounts. So you get a list of accounts, right? So you have your list of accounts. Then you start sorting your accounts, you do your stuff. And when you're done, you can now set up your trigger. Say, okay, anytime they do it before update, then call that class. What does the class need? The class actually needs a list of accounts. Then supply it with list of accounts, then you're good. Does this make sense? I wish it together.
Yes, it does. But I have a question.
Yeah, shoot.
Okay. Please can you go to the trigger class? Yes. So this trigger.new, is it where did you assign it to accounts?
Trigger.new itself is a list of accounts. Don't forget context from yesterday.
Okay. Yes.
Trigger.new is a list of new accounts coming in. Trigger.old is a list of the accounts that we've created, the accounts we are trying to update. Like, let's say we have an account called Antonio Olasinde. Then I go to the front end and say, update Antonio Olasinde, update. That's the new name of that account. So at every point when you are in your trigger, you have two data. You have Antonio Olasinde, which is trigger.old, and you have Antonio Olasinde update, which is trigger.new.
Okay.
You get that?
Yes, I get it.
Or it's not a single data. It's, even though it's one thing you are doing from the front end, it will come in as a list. Both of them will come in as a list.
Okay, that's great. Then you also said something, when it comes to a list, it picks the ID. So what if in the case we need to pick another field? What do we use?
I don't get it.
Over here, on line 49. Yeah. It said those accounts that will be there is the ID is to pick.
Yeah, because we requested for account ID.
Okay, so if we are requesting for maybe another field like account last name, is it right for us to use this, or because of we are working with account ID, that's a unique, let's say like a unique key?
Account ID is a unique key, but actually let's try that your question. Account IDs are unique keys. That's why we were able to collect it. This same thing, let me show you one. I wanted to show it yesterday, but let me just show it now. This is one other way you could actually write a query. Let's say you actually want, this is what I've been showing you before.
Yeah.
Contact lists. There is another one, map of ID from my account. You can query directly into this. Equals same thing. Select ID, name, from.
Okay.
You can query directly into this. What you get will now be a map of ID and account. You can also query directly into a list. So you can query into a map. You can query into a list. Do you get that?
Yes, it makes sense then.
Now, let's try that your other one where you're talking of something like accounts.
Let's say first name.
Okay. We're first name, right? First name. There is no first name in accounts. We're name.
Okay, sorry, name here.
Okay. No.
Don't work.
No, because the only account field you have on contact is account ID.
Okay. Yes. I get.
You get that, right? The only field of accounts that you have on, it's contact you are querying.
Yes.
The only field of account we have on contact
that's the lookup. Yes, that's right.
So account ID then it helps you to pick up what you need from the list instead of doing that long for line that we did yesterday.
Okay, that's clear now. It's fine. Yeah. Thank you.
No worries. So I can save this, right? Okay, so that's dealing with moving your code from trigger into a class, so you can invoke the class from the trigger. So this class now, I could now use it for anything. I could come here and say Black Force, right? Black Force dot contact for account. I could call it from, all I need to do is to supply it with a list of account, right? list. This is equals new list of acts. Then this is this. And I'm good. So I could now use that class, that code I wrote yesterday that I can't use for anything aside the trigger. Now I could use it for anything. I could use it for trigger. I could use it for flow. I could call it in another class. I could call it in anonymous Apex. Now, one thing, I don't know if I talked about this yesterday, but trigger actually works trigger will be invoked at any time you are doing database, whether you are doing data imports, all these import wizard, what's it called again? Data.io, all those import stuff, trigger will invoke. Anytime you are doing a bulk transaction, trigger will invoke. Any mass, anything will invoke a trigger. Now, one thing I want to talk about before we leave trigger is this. Be careful when you are dealing with, especially with every one of them, but especially updates. So you don't run into a recursive loop. Now, recursive loop in the sense that, say I say, this is a silly example, but I know I can't just remember them right now. I've seen real life ones where people run into recursive loop, but just take my silly example for example. When you create an account, the requirement is every time an account is created, create another account. Now, what do you think will happen? When account A is created, a trigger will create account B. When account B is created, another trigger will trigger account C. When account C is created, another trigger will trigger account D. So it keeps on going recursively forever. So there are real life scenarios. I can't just in my head. I've been working since morning, but there are real life scenarios where things like that happen. So you want to sit down and how do I go about this thing so you don't run into a recursive loop, because you don't have control over. All the control you have is when you're writing the code. Once you leave the code, once the thing is running itself, it's invoking itself. So you don't have control, right? So you have to be sure you are writing something that is not, because another thing is, you have trigger, you have workflow, you have flow. If you have written flow to as trigger, what's it called? Record trigger flow. It also has both, flow has both before trigger and after trigger. I think one is fast feed update and they are actually there in flow, before trigger and after trigger flow. Now imagine you have a flow. No, probably you are not even the one that created it. You have another flow that is doing something. Okay, that is saying when a contact is created, right? You have a flow that says when the contact is created, create a tax, right? Then in your own code here, probably another person gave you another requirement 20 years into the future and says, okay, when a tax is created, create contacts. Now, what happens is when they create task, your own trigger will create contact. Their own flow will create task. Your own trigger will kick in, create another contact, and it keeps on going like that recursively. So you want to be sure all those things, like when you are writing your trigger, when you have a requirement and you are working on an already used org, a live org, you want to make sure, you want to check all those places where things are working automatically, all those business automations, and make sure you're not overriding. It's not really override, actually. It's because it's not like you are overriding their work. You can just run into, you are not just checking for only override. You are checking for, will you not end up in a circle? Okay, what is this guy doing here? Does it affect, is it relating to any of the object I'll be working with? Does it affect anything I'll be doing? Then even your own code, how does it affect, what is the action of your own code on their own implementation, on the already made implementation? So you want to look into things like that. And when you're writing things like this, for example, especially in Flow, then you get a new requirement. You want to check for the already created ones and see how you can improve them instead of writing another one. If there's no way you can improve it to accommodate your own, it's fine. But check first if there is a way you can improve the already created one to accommodate your own requirement than creating a new one that might end up overriding someone else's work, or worse, turn everything into a recursive loop. I hope you understand that.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So that's trigger. Does anybody have any question again on trigger? Trigger works in box, like it comes as a list, it comes as a map. We've looked into how to sort the map yesterday. We looked into how to sort the list also yesterday, and when to use which, when to use after, when to use before, and stuff like that. So there are some, I will just drop a link for you in the chat. There are some considerations when working with map. They are just much, although they are not things you will come across every day, but at some point when you are dealing with an issue and you can check out this, there are some considerations here you want to look at. They are not things you come across every day, but they are just small things you consider when your trigger is not working as expected. You can come and check if there is any of these consideration blocking them out. So that's trigger. Let's go into test, right? Apex testing. You want to do, we've talked about class, we've talked about triggers, but any of this code is not going to production. We not enter production successfully without a test. And according to Sourceforce, your test, you need to pass 75%. Your test needs to pass 75% before you can deploy into production. So how do we test? Right? Tests are also in classes, like they are class with, like the same way we used to write class. It's just a bit different. So let's say we want to write a text class for all these things we've been doing since, right? We'll just come and create a normal class. Say Black Force contact controller test, something like that. Okay. Then you have your tests. Now, one best practice for test is to leave it as private, because it's not really you won't be using it for everything. You're just for anything. It's not like you'll be invoking it somewhere or something. It's just a test, right? So the keyword for test is at, like, when you're writing a test class, test method, you want to add is test. So when you add this should go away. Yep. So at is test. This shows that don't these things are not callable. They are not invocable. They are not part of our work. Anything that goes in between this bracket is not part of our work. It won't affect your work. It won't use live data. It won't, anything I create inside this test would not be created. They won't create, like they will create, but they won't persist. Once I'm done with the test, I won't see the data again. The data are gone. Another thing with the test is although we'll still come into the exception, I don't get access to data. When you are dealing with tests, you can create your own. Like if I'm doing tests here, I can actually create my own data, then work with it. But once I'm done with the test, the data is gone. They are not persistent data. So that's test, but make sure they are wrapped. Anything you are writing as a test, so you don't mess with data. You don't mess with imagine you're working in production and we've been creating Anthony Black Force for the past 2 weeks. Imagine it's a production org. My sack letter is on the table. So you don't want to do that. That is where the is test comes into play. All those testing we've been doing, we could easily do them here. And it's like the same way we're doing, it's just that they won't reflect. We can create data, we can query the data we created ourselves. Right? Let's say I do insert account. I can come now and say, select those. If I do select now, I am going to get the account I created here, not the account in the database. So that is how work. So like I said, it's a normal class, and a normal class, they have methods. So the same way we have methods here, you can also have methods here. So let's pick these things one by one. Let's say, what did we do inside trial? I think this thing are actually very complicated. Let's start simple. Let's write another class. Public, static, sorry, you want to say?
Yeah, editor, yes, I want to say something. So in other words, using this test class, whatever we do here, it should just be available in the test class. So we cannot even see, for example, if we insert a record or update a record or something, we cannot see it from the front end because it did not persist into the database. Is that correct?
No, you won't see it from the front end. You only have access to it in between. Like you can still query it while you are still working here, while you are still working in this test, but you don't. Once you are done with the testing, once the testing completes, whether it fails or passes, the data is gone.
Okay, and it can also not be, this test class, it can also not be invoked by another class, right? Can it?
No, because it's a test class and it's a private class.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Private class, you can't use it outside.
Yeah, yes, that's true.
So private class and it's like that. So now let's start writing the method. But before I write the method, let's write a sample class. Or what we have here, big classes. Void create account. Then I'm going to supply. Now, when you are writing classes, sorry, I will just be dropping these things as I remember. Then when you are writing classes, always make sure when you are passing data into it, at least data like this, data that will be used, pass them as a list. so that it can be used for bulk transaction, not just single transactions. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense.
So let's say if I had just put account here, I can't use this create account for any other thing apart from one account. But if I put list of accounts, I can use it to create one account. I can use it to create multiple accounts at the same time. So it's always good to bulkify your class when you are writing them. So then we'll just say insert outside. We can even do try and count, but let's just leave it like that for now. That's the simplest class you can have. Then return account. Let's do return. And we say list of accounts. Accounts. Right? Yep. So then for our test, we can now say what is it? Create accounts, right? So we can say for your method to wrap them in is test. For each of your method is test. Then your normal method static void create account test, create account test. As it. So now we have our test class test method, right? This is the test class. This is the test class. This is the test method. Now let's start looking into it, right? So we can say all we need to do is, let's take this off for now. We know it's a static class, so we can actually invoke it directly. It's the same thing we've been doing since, right? That is, let's say this is the new class we wrote. What we do before is we just come here, open anonymous index, then do this dot, right? I'm not doing anything different. Dot create class, create something. Did not bring it. Create account. Then, but the problem here is that if you run this, anything you do will be created live. But now with your test class, anything I do for doing sake. I would see them while I'm here, but that's all. So I could just simulate list of account ACCs equals new list of accounts. And new account. I can just say 100, right? For integer, I just want to create 100 accounts. Integer A equals 0, A less than 100, A plus plus, then ACCS dot add new account. Name equals new account plus A, right? I've done this a couple of times, so you already know what I'm trying to do. I just want to generate 100 list of accounts, then create them, then I'll pass in ACCSA. Then I can come and start saying, now, these are, if you now want to start, I'm expecting a result here. So I will say the result I'm expecting is list of accounts. So come and say list of accounts and created equals that. Then I can come and say system dot assert equals. There's assert equals. We'll look into each one of them. It's just like the same thing we were doing before. This is just doing the assert equals is just doing some calculations for us. So you can see what you are expecting and actual. So I'm expecting 100 data and the actual is account created. I know account created is a list. Account created dot size. So I'm expecting my size to be 100. So this is going to give me true or false. Instead of debugging all those things we've been debugging since, this is just me checking, okay, is the size of my account equals to 100, true or false? That's it. So save this. Saved, then testing. Remember this place from a couple of weeks ago. There's the test where you get your result, and if you go up here, you have the test where you can say new run, right? Or just say run test. There's run test. There's new run. If you've run some before, you can do a rerun. Then you get a result here. So if I do run test, okay, our test failed. Interesting. Nice way to start. Let's see what happens. Unable to create contact. Okay. So, okay. The problem, our trigger is kicking in. So what was the issue? Let's see. The trigger kicked in, so it wasn't. Let's see what the issue is. Send here now. Insert your first exception on row 0. Let's just check it from here. So insert field first exception on row 0. Unable to create contact admin. Unable to create contact. That's our trigger from trigger. Black force, account trigger, for insert, insert. So why is it unable to create? Oh, we didn't put name in it. We didn't put last name in our contact. So that's actually why it's failing. So we could just go back and say last name equals what? A dot name. As it should be good. So let's run the test again. Yep, passed. So why did it pass, right? We want to just keep opening to, if you run, you can run, like if you see test here, you can actually do run all. If you have multiple test classes, you can do run all, and it's going to show each one of the, in our own case, I have just one method here. That's why it's showing, we'll still write one, we'll see each one of them listed. So let's see what happens here. No, this is not where we're going. There is this place where you can actually read your responses. And if you come here, look for the class, Black Force account trigger. Okay, the trigger was also triggered because your class invoked it's this thing is actually now let's just before we go, let's look at what happened when I do this. I run a test here. My test went to this class, inserted an account. My account in the back end invoked a trigger, right? Invoked this trigger. So when you run a test, right? When you run a test, because you can't actually, triggers are uninvocable. You can't invoke them manually. So when we'll still go into trigger testing, but this is a very good example of it. Even though the only thing we thought we are testing was this create account, our trigger was also tested, right? Our trigger was also tested in the sense that the account was created, right? So when an account is created, a trigger will automatically, this before and after trigger will be triggered automatically. So it is also tested at the same time, but you can't actually test a trigger. But mind you, it will still count as your code coverage. So you need to find a way to always test your triggers. I don't know if that's making sense. The only way, let's say I actually don't have this class, and I want to test a trigger. I want to test this trigger. All I need to do is to say insert account. Then my trigger will be tested. That's all. Once I insert the account, I already have before insert, after insert, it will definitely trigger these two. And that's what this has already done for us, insert account. So automatically our trigger is also tested. But you can't explicitly test a trigger. I hope that makes sense. So now let's go to our Black Force contact controller class, which is this. So now all these ones these are the only ones we covered. These are not covered. You can see the same thing from here. These ones were covered. We were able to create before. We were able to do this. These went through, but our code never came here, even though it's still in the same after insert. This is where positive and negative testing comes into play, right? We have, in this case, the same thing can happen here if I do try and catch. If I do try and catch here, the same thing is still going to happen because everything we passed into our test, was actually good data. Well, good data, right? So everything was successful. So we never had any chance of coming here. That first one we ran, if you check it, I don't know if I still have it. Yeah, this is it. I hope it's not. It has refreshed this page. But let me see if I can take it off so we see. If you do that, if there is an error, you get this one will actually run. So let's actually see that in action. Where's the test class? What did I do that time?
You went to the account trigger and removed last name.
Okay.
And put last name.
I need to open it again. This one is a summary. Okay, so let's do this again. Although we'll still do negative testing. So when you are testing, you want to do positive testing, you want to do negative testing. What if things don't go your way? What happens? So run this test again. And go to the trigger. You can see we got here. Our before ran fine, our after ran fine, and we also got here because some, but in our own case, none of the stuff will even go through. So we definitely got here because even if you look at the result, you will see unable to create contact there. Where is it? Insert field, unable to create contact admin, which means we successfully read this line of code. The thing is, the way test works, it reads line by line, every action, every expression. You can see all these brackets, they are not expressions. But every valid expression is going to read them. Like when you execute a code, it follows that execution. Everywhere that execution goes to, reads it. But even though this is part of your code, if your execution does not reach this catch, it will see it as it wasn't tested. So now, how do we fix that? So we can actually do good data and bad data at the same time. You can say, okay, this is create accounts positive test. Positive test whereby everything is actually correct. Let's change this back. Let's change this back. Let's change this back. Whereby everything is correct. And let's load another one, negative test. Negative test whereby we are sure this thing is bad. This record is bad because name is actually a required field. So if we test this, although your test will fail, but if you check your code coverage, there are two things you're actually doing here. You want to make sure your test pass and you have a good code coverage. So let's go to the no. We took care of this. Oh,
actually, you're opening the wrong one. I think if you come down, you see the last one down there on the tests list of tests. Come down. Yeah, I think you opened the wrong one. Yeah, I opened that.
And that doesn't matter. There are different stuffs.
Oh, okay.
This is summary. This is just summary of, you can see one passed. We have two tests now, a positive test, a negative test. So what I might want to do here is, let's even get before, so I know what I'm expecting here. System.debug and created. I just want to know what I'm expecting here first before I debug something so that this test too can pass. The reason why it's actually not showing the reason why it's not showing on the trigger, what you were trying to point out, is because we never got to the trigger. The account was never inserted. You get? Do you understand what happened there?
No.
Okay, let me run the test again and show you what I'm trying to say. Now, look at this. Even though we knew we had a bad data, right? But the problem was, you see this negative test, it never got to trigger. The account was never inserted because the account is bad. Do you get that?
Yeah.
The account is bad, so the account was never inserted. As a result of that, we never got to trigger. So now, according to this test, the positive one got to trigger, but never got to this exception, right? because everything was good. There was no bad data out of it. So we never got here. The bad one in this case never even got to trigger at all. Let me take this off so you actually see what I'm saying. It was only the before insert. What I ran was the bad. The only thing I ran was the bad data, right? So according to this, the account will not be created, right? Because name is the required field. Do you get that altogether to this point?
Yes.
The account will not be created, but the before trigger would have run before we discovered account was not created. But at the point where we discover account was not created, we couldn't go forward, which means after insert was totally
manipulated. Will not work. Yeah.
Exactly. So the only reason why it was showing green before was because of the positive one that went through it.
Okay.
So let's try and see if we can fix that. We can just put account. Let's say name equals, we'll bring our name back. Name equals that. Then what we can do is in the trigger, we can say the last name is being collected. We know last name is a required field on last name is a required field on contact. Say last name is being collected from probably, let me see an account field. Other account field. Set up. I want to use an account field that is not required. Then I will populate it for the first one, not populate it for the second one. So the first one, everything will pass account creation, but the first one will pass contact creation. The second one will not pass contact creation. Let's say site. Yep, site. So say from my, is it my test? Yeah, from my test, the trigger. I can now say trigger is collected from site. So if site is not populated, this will fail. If site is populated on account, not contacts. Now, I'm collecting the site from account. If site is populated on account, this will be successful. If site is not populated on account, this will fail because last name is required. So it can't be null. So for the positive one, I'll populate site. So I can say site equals, I'll still use the same thing, new site plus A. Well, I won't put anything for the second one. So what happens is the first one will pass. The first one will execute this line. The second one will not execute this line because it will actually execute, but don't be able to create. Then it will definitely execute this one also. Save. It's just a way to improve you can see the percentage of code coverage here. You want to make sure you are gunning for 100, but at least make sure you meet 75. That's all they are saying. Because there are some cases whereby they won't just be able to read some lines. Where is it? You can see now we have everything covered. The before was covered, the successful after was covered, the bad after was also covered. So let's now make sure our test actually pass. Let me see what I'm expecting. Yeah, did I console it? I want to make sure this test also passes. This one is passing. But we are sure we know that account was not created. So account.size will be something else. So what I can do to make sure it passes, check what account.size is actually. Account related.size should be 0. This is what is calculating these ones. That pass or fail. This assert equals. There is also assert. So run test. Insert failed. And hold on. The dog is not working here. The dog OCC.size. Assert. There's also assert. There's also assert before we put there. So from there, see what's going on here. Test. Run test. This is good that one. I just see 0. I found like this. Run test. Result is fail. Yeah. I need that site. My site is coming out as 100. Okay. This is all the took this off first. So now that is running. Save. Run test. I'll just add. Okay, what is happening is you're getting a runtime error. So you're getting a runtime error actually. So what you can do to get an actual result is wrap it in a try and catch. This is actually another problem because your try and catch, so you're not returning anything catch. DML exception. Stand up the ball. error, and you get a new error. So please. Okay. It's a return statement. So you want to return an empty list, because what you are returning must be a list of accounts. So you can just return an empty list of accounts. Yeah, right. Another way you could go about this is another way you could go about it is actually have your return statement outside, say list of accounts, was new list. Then instead of returning here, you can say RT equals SCCs. Move the return, do anything you want to do inside the catch. And you can actually have finally. There is also, I think there is actually finally, I know there is finally, but finally return RT. Missing repasses required. Let's start, okay. Finally is actually there, but I'll just do it outside of um no. Hold on. So what I just did is at any point, I know I have a return, which is a list. So if it's successful, I can say, okay, my return is now the successful account. If it's not successful, I will just return the empty list like that. So here I could easily say I'm actually expecting just zero instead of it failing along the way. I know I'm expecting something. And I have a successful run. Both will, okay, I did the other one. I have a successful run. All I needed to do was return something from here. If it's successful, it returns the successful account, which in this case gives us 100 here because both of them actually passed, which means it went through. The positive went through, the negative went through. So for the positive, we got our result, right, which will be 100. For the negative, we got 0. So both pass, and our overall is also going up. It was 4 before, so I think we've covered a couple of other things. So we've called, okay, we wrote more code. That was why it went up. So we wrote more code and we covered system.debug is also not an expression. It's not a valid executing code. So that's why it's not picking it. So we we cut an exception, at least for those bad ones, and the correct ones, this one ran. If we didn't do that negative testing, this will also tell us we are not, this will also not read because we won't get here. But because of that negative testing, this was successfully read and it counts alongside our. So you can see you have 87% for these, 14% for these. I think the reason for that is all these other ones that we've not tested. Okay, let's go to update. I think I'm interested in testing all these things though. Contact for account. Yeah, if we do update on account, this will also pick up because this is being called from the trigger. We'll see how that works now, but let's go to update. Let's just update an account, right? We don't even need, now this is how you test the trigger. We don't have an update class. We don't actually have an update class. We don't have any class we want to test. The main thing we want to test here is this trigger. The main thing we actually want to test is this before update trigger, right? We don't have any update account class, so there's nothing to call. So if there's nothing to call, all I needed to do is to just I'll update myself. So it's test static void update and test. Then this is how you deal with data, because right now if you query list account SCCs equals, because you want something to actually update, right? So let's say select ID name where just right, and say system.sat. A sat will only check if, like, you have to put your if I do a sat, so I can say SCCs dot size is greater than 100. This is what sat does. So it's almost the same thing as a sat equals. So it's always just go with a sat equals. So what I want to do here is just a sat equals. Let me just use a sat equals. A sat equals. There's also a sat not equals, as you can see there. Sat equals. Expected is I'm expecting 20 accounts. Actual is ACCs dot size. So let's see what we'll get. No. There is also one mode of testing here, black force. You can actually test, instead of, like, if you do run test, it runs the 3 methods, but you can actually say, okay, I only want to run update account test, right? Instead of running everything, just go to test, new run, then pick the class and pick the methods you want to test. In my case, I only want to test update account test, so run, which is going to fail because I'm not getting anything, right? Like my I actually want to debug something here. Run. Mm-hmm. Another dog works. Maybe I was just trying to push it down. I want to see this.
Hello, Tony.
Yeah.
Okay, so why did you feel that before you said let's test this debug? Is it because in this test class you've not simulated you've not simulated the account you want to update? Is that why it failed? I'm asking.
That first one that we were not getting the debug, right?
Yeah,
it's
because
we are not even getting here. We are not getting to this line. It's, we did not do try and catch initially at that particular one. There was no try and catch. So It failed. It's a runtime error. So it never came back.
I understand that one. And the one I'm talking about is this update account test, this latest one you just tested. When you tried it, we are trying to update the first 20 names in the account. So I'm just asking, why did it not run? Why didn't it?
I didn't actually do anything. I was just trying to console. Okay, the reason why it was because if you remember what I wrote here, system.assert equals.
Okay.
Assert equals.
Okay.
System.assert equal. Then I put 20 here.
Yeah.
Put accs.size and it fill. Now, the reason why it fill is what I actually wanted to show you with the line 20. Because accs.size is actually not 20, 0.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's true.
Let me show you. That's what I'm trying to bring up. ACCS is going to be 0. We won't get anything because there is no data. Neuron. Yeah, neuron. Black force test, I need just this one. Run it. You can see assertion field, expected 20, actual is 0. You get?
Yeah.
Let's go into it and actually check what account is. Okay, account is empty. Remember what I said when we started test. You don't have data. When you have this keyword, you don't have data. So how do we get data? Create your own data yourself.
Exactly. I thought as much.
List account. New account equals new account, new list of accounts. Really, bro. Then I will just select 20 accounts. Even 20 accounts and I start new accounts. Wow.
New accounts, you are not referencing it in the next line 24.
Sorry?
You inserted new account. Okay, or you can change that one to ACCS. I don't know.
No, these are different. This is something else.
It's something else, yeah.
This is actually something else. This one is something else. They are not the same.
Yeah.
These accounts are going to the DB and we are done. Then we are now querying back those accounts from the DB. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Okay, okay, I get
They're
it.
actually different. This new account is different from this ACC. This is coming from the DB. This is going to the DB, but they are different transactions.
Okay, yeah. I guess.
So let's run that again. Save. Rerun. We're failing though. First exception. Why is that? Account. No. I won't get this thing at that. Let me see. Oh, it will go and be creating trigger. It will go and be creating, it will trigger this what we're doing here. Mm-hmm. This start account will trigger these ones.
Yeah.
So I already said our last name is collected from site. So we need to add sites to this thing. Sites equals new site. Yeah, plus it. It actually is plus even. Rerun. Success. We have our 20 accounts now.
Yeah.
Because it's created. So we just query back our 20 account and we're going to if I remove limit here, just to be sure it was just 20 that was created, like it's just 20 account I have in my ODB, I could just remove this limit and still do the same thing and hopefully I still get 20. Rerun. So in my old database, you can see that it's not a reflection of everything we've been creating and deleting and querying things has nothing to do with this place.
Yeah.
And I will update now that I've done since yesterday. So everything I've done today is not reflected at all. So now we are dealing with test class. You can safely test without we thinking we have many accounts named Anthony already. Now we can have Anthony. Once we finish this test, that's all. We can start another one. So now let's go into updates.
So I have a question.
Okay.
So for this test class too, does it still obey that rule of 100 SQL queries?
It still has its own. It has governor limits, right?
Yeah.
Check it. There is also governor limits. It has its own limits too. 2 DML, 1 SQL.
Okay, 100. Okay.
So it has its own limit also.
Okay.
Yeah. Close. Now, if we check, we're actually moving forward because right now okay, let me just run the old test so we can see that we are progressing. Our mark is going up. Still stuck at 5 though, but we should have increased some things. Oh, we're still doing just insert, so we're still stuck at the same the same thing, because the only thing we've done insert at the top, so we are not doing anything interesting yet. Let's go into updates. Now we have our accounts. Now let's update the accounts. The problem statement is we want to test this. We want to test this before update, but we actually have no, because if you check what you have, I think the only problem we are having with trigger with this file right now is just this when before. So let's see, where is trigger. This is it. So this is the only problem we're having now. So we want to test this. So how do we test it? We do an update, but we don't have an update class that we can call, right? It's very simple. Just run your updates normally and you will be good. It will go and call it itself. So I will just run through for count this is yes. I can even run the updates directly without no change, but let's just make things interesting. A dot name equals a dot name plus and date update is 60 years down. Okay, so now let's run this test. %, we're moving forward. So let's see what actually happens. So our trigger is now 100% because we've successfully read this line and this line, a before update and what should happen when a before update happens. And with extension, with this one called, our controller will also have gotten an upgrade also. Not you. Yeah, this one. This was the class that was called. This was the method that was called create contact for account. So if you go to your contact for account, you see that it has also been read successfully. That's also been read successfully and good if contains a.id find.count. Did they actually contain contact? Interesting. What happened? So we created account, right? We created account. Oh, the account already has contacts. Jesus Christ. Another trigger is creating contacts for the account automatically. Interesting. See the trigger. Because we created all these, we just created this new account, right? We created the account. Immediately we create the account. This after insert trigger is creating contact for them. That is why this one is saying all the accounts are with contact. That code we wrote yesterday. I don't think I want to explain it again, but all we are trying to do is all the accounts that we sent to the trigger actually has contact. That's why this was not invoked, because all we did here is if accounts with contact, else. So we sent 20 accounts, all the 20 accounts had contact. So it never got to this point. I hope you understand what happened here.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, good. So this is just test, right? It's just keep manipulating things you until you get your desired result. And okay, let's just until you get your desired result. One thing you can do that is a cheat, right? If you're familiar with ChatGPT, you can just copy your code, dump it there, tell you to write the test class for you, and you're you're good to go to give you a fine test class. If you can try that out anytime you're free, write your class.
Can we just use it for everything?
Sorry?
I said, can we just use ChatGPT for everything instead then?
Yeah, you can, as long as you know how to prompt it. So, because sometimes test classes are actually more worrisome than the actual class. For you to start, before you can get this 9% up to 75 sometimes, you will sweat. So if you want to make things easier for you, just copy the class. If you don't want to write. But try and learn so that when ChatGPT gives you things you need to manipulate, you will be able to manipulate it. But at the end of the day, you want to work smart, right? So when you're dealing with things like this, you already know it, so don't bother yourself. Write your class. Even the class, if you know how to prompt it, you can still tell it to write it for you, but at least write the class, then tell GPT to write the test for you, and you will be good. FYI. So let's continue. Where were we? So we're here. This is 100%. This is still not complete yet. We are still having this. So how could we manipulate this to work? So we can actually come here and say, we can come to our trigger and do something like I'll just manipulate this a bit. If a dot, let me pick another. I'm just simulating. You will get live data. When you get live requirements, you know how to go about this, but I'm just trying to simulate data you can. So let's say tier, for example. Tier, okay, let's say facts. So we can say if facts is present, if a dot facts, create contact. If a dot facts is not present, it won't create contact. So we know we can actually manipulate our results in some way that some contacts will not be created, some will be created. What do you want? Additional expression must be of type Boolean. Oh, if a dot facts is not equals to null. Okay, so in our test class, we can say 10 of it we have facts. So we know 10 we create, 10 we now create. Facts equals idea. So let's create another 10. Another 10 without facts. So all I'm just doing is I just instructed the trigger that if there is a fax in the account, then create if there is no fax in the account, create contact. But if there is fax, don't bother creating contact. So you get, and in my test, all I just did was, okay, 10 accounts, we have facts, which means 10 accounts will not have contacts. And 10 accounts will not have facts, which means 10 accounts, another 10 accounts, we have contact. So this will not have contact, this will have contact. So by extension, here we will have 10 that will be fine and 10 that will not be fine. Do you understand that?
Yeah.
Great. So let's test it. Run test. Which one failed? Create account negative test failed. Why? Why should that fail? Create account negative test. What do we do? Oh, okay. Actually, I'll check that again. Where is it? Assertion. Okay, assertion failed. Expected 0, actual was 100. Oh, okay, we've done some things here. Okay, I will just add facts so that you go after. The reason why it's failing is because of this. What happened is because there is no facts. Like there's no facts. There's no facts in our negative trigger. So if there's no facts, it's trying to do this, but it's failing. You get, it's trying to create contact. You know, we didn't add site. So it says if A does not have facts, then create contact. And what are we doing here? It shouldn't actually be a problem. Assertion failed. So it's actually creating this account. It's creating the account. Why is it creating the account? It shouldn't create the account. Let's just fancy close that. Well, before we even move forward, this is what I want to check. Where is it? I want to check that that's refreshed. Fascinating. Run test. Okay, so both of them are now. This is actually what I want to check. The facts is just the negative is just because I edited the after inside. That's why it is negative. I guess at some point, I can't start thinking of what happened there. But if you have the time, you can go through it. There was just a calculation with the facts that is not correct with the new implementation we wrote. But this is actually where we are going. Where is it again? This place. Before, this was not calculated, but right now we have the two. Because we now have some account with contact, some account without contact. So which means we'll have 10 that will have contact. We have 10 that does not, which means we were able to successfully run through this whole code successfully. So if we take out these ones that we won't be testing, we'll actually have 100% here. Right? We already have 100% on the trigger. We already have 100% on the trigger. Yep. So if we want to achieve 100% here, just go ahead and test these ones also, right? All you need to do here is just call this method. So there's nothing inside it. And just call the method one by one with the appropriate data and you'll be good. This one is just collecting contact ID. So supply it with contact ID. This one is collecting registered student. Supply it with these three things. This one is collecting supplied age, supplied. Okay, this is actually, okay, to test this one, to test this, this is actually this is a constructor, not a method. So to test it, you will have to invoke Black Force controller itself. So if you want to test this constructor, you remember we tested it at its test, static void test constructor. All you need to do is to invoke Black Force itself. So Black Force contact controller. I know we've talked of this one before. Black Force contact controller BC equals new Black Force contact controller. That's it. You've invoked it. So if you run this test, you should also have that covered. Why is that? Constructor not defined. Why is constructor not defined? Constructor called. Oh, okay. It has supply each, so integer. We have an integer as just it to. Okay. So if you run this test, your constructor 2 should be covered. So your constructor is now covered. As it. So to now start doing to do fail or pass, you can do assert. It's the assert. This is code coverage. This is test. This is your test, your actual test. This you can do as many assert as possible. It will, once it sees anyone that is not correct, assert is just like, okay, this is what I'm testing. This is what I expect, right? It's just like what we were doing the other time. We were supposed to get a response, but we didn't even get anything. So we know that test is failing. That test is seriously failing. So anytime anybody does anything that is not correct, that's the thing we just hang. That's the whole idea of what was happening that time before we added try and catch. So if we don't want that, then we'll fix it. Those are the usefulness of test classes. You don't want to have runtime errors in your code. So catch the runtime error, do what you want to do with it, and if it's a negative test you're doing, you can easily say, okay, after anything bad happens with my data, I don't expect anything to be created. And that's it. If you expect something, probably you've done some Mojoro and you should create, then you put it here. And if it's like according to your own calculation, this is according to human calculation. Your own calculation, what you're expecting, and what is actually coming. So if what you're expecting is not equal to what is coming, then your test will fail. That means something is wrong somewhere. Go and check it out. You get? So you check it out and you fix it until what you are expecting is the same as what you are getting as a result. That's the whole idea of this assert equals. And also assert, you have to put the whole expression. System dot assert dot assert count created dot size equals 0. That's the same thing. Both of them are the same thing. So it's just easier to write it this way with the assert equals. So that's it. Do we have any question? First class. Is there any question? Okay. There's no question. As tomorrow we'll still continue with class. We'll see how we can actually, it's actually pretty simple, but we'll see how we can get live data from, even in tests, you can still, maybe there are some things you need live data for. There are ways you can get live data. And also we are going to start writing, we'll write methods whereby we can use the same data, because the problem with this data we just created here, this data is that it doesn't reflect for the others. The 100 accounts we created here is different from the 100 accounts we created here, is different from the 20 accounts we created here. So we can actually create a general data, like a data set somewhere, and use it for everything, but we'll look into that tomorrow. That's from me from today. Guys, have a good evening. Take care of yourselves.
Thank you.